welcome to our live broadcast. Today we're looking at the Kotita Sutta, Anguttara Nikaya Book of Fours, number 173. Why I hit upon this sutta, it's not precisely to do with the actual content of the sutta, but it's to do with the point being made by the sutta, which is actually quite important for those of us attempting to cultivate an understanding of reality. So the sutta is a conversation between Sariputta and Mahakotika. Sariputta, of course, was the Buddha's general of Dhamma, the right-hand man of the Buddha, right-hand dude. Mahakotika, another one of the famous arahants. And Mahakotika had some questions for Sariputta, and the answers are somewhat puzzling at first glance, but the wording within them is quite important. So questions are, and it's just a set of 4 questions. It's like one of these formal inquiries. So you give 4 inquiries into the 4 possibilities. Something is something, something isn't something, something both is something and isn't something, and neither is something nor isn't something. Those are the 4 possibilities. Now you'd think there would be only 2, right? Is and it is or isn't. But there are certain things, certain concepts at least, perhaps certain realities, that both are something and aren't something, and there are those that neither are something nor aren't something. But if you could answer negatively to all 4 of these, well, then you had something quite special. And so this is often the case where it was none of these 4. And then you had to explain how it could be none of those 4, and that's what this sutta does. It's in relation to contact of the senses. Channang avuso pasayatananam. With the contact, with the senses, pasayatanam, the senses of contact, or the senses in contact. The 4 spheres, the 6 spheres of contact is maybe what it is. So ayatana is like a sphere. The 6 spheres of contact, of course, are the 6 senses. And these are one very clear way of describing experience, and thereby, from a Buddhist point of view, describing reality. And that's what this sutta really explains, and this is why I picked up on it. I want you all to read, to think about and understand this sutta. Channang avuso pasayatananam asesa viraga nirodha. With the cessation, the complete and utter cessation with no remainder of the 6 spheres of contact. This is a description of nibbana, actually. But there's a theory behind this question. The question is something that's confusing this monk. Well, when the 6 senses, or maybe he's an arahant and he's just asking for the benefit of others, but he says, with the cessation, when all of these, when experience ceases, when there's no seeing, no hearing, no smelling, no tasting, no feeling, no thinking, through the attainment of nibbana, atanyang kinchi, Is there anything else? Ati is there? Ginchi, anything? Anyang, other. So what's he asking? He's asking, it's a question that probably is actually quite easily understood for most of us. Yeah, we want to know this. So when the senses cease, is there anything else? And he says, Ma he wang awoso. Ma means don't. So it's quite curious. It means like don't let it be thus. Don't think thus, maybe. Don't hold that view. So the view that there is something else when they cease is not a view to be held. The language here is important. And I'll explain why it's important. I give an example of how in modern times we cause problems by not paying enough attention to exactly what's being said. We cultivate views based on leaping to conclusions based on what's being said, or based on what's not being said, actually. So then he asks, well, with the cessation, complete and utter cessation of the spheres of contact, when there's no contact, is there not anything else? Is it that there is not anything else? Natanyang ginchi. He says, Mahi wang awaso. Don't say that. Don't think that. Don't believe that. Don't hold that. So the view that there is nothing is also not to be held, not to be believed. And then, well, you can see where this is going. There's the four kinds. So the third one is, well, is it that there both is and is not anything else with the cessation of the spheres of contact, meaning contact between vision and the eye and sound and the ear and so on. Mahe wang awaso. No. It's not that there both is and isn't. There's something else. And he says, well, is it that there neither is nor is not something else? And he says, don't believe that. So he's totally shut down, because you could say, well, maybe it's that there neither is nor isn't. Maybe it's something else. He says, don't think that. And Mahakotika becomes confused, or else he could just be playing the part, because sometimes they would have this dialogue even as arahants to lay down something, to make something clear for the whole sangha. So it would be it's called a Dhamma talk with two Dhamma seats. So they would have two seats, and normally when you have a Dhamma talk you have a big seat where they have to sit up high. But then they would have two seats, and one of them would ask questions and the other one would answer. So very, very well may be what was going on here. We don't want to criticize Mahakotika for being confused. He may have just been playing the part of questioner. And he says, well, I hear you say it's not this, it's not that, it's not this, it's not that. It's none of these four things. You say we shouldn't hold. You respond in this way. Yatha katang bana avuso imasa basitasa atto databo. How should we understand? How should this be understood? In what way should the meaning of this statement be understood? And here's the important part. It's a fairly key point in Buddhist philosophy and practice. He says, Chanang avuso pasayatana nangaseso virada. These four statements, iti wadang, speaking thus or holding thus, appapanchang papancheti. Appapanchang papancheti. It's an important It's an important two words. And I'm not sure I can quite do it justice. Not easily. Papancha. Papancha is a word that is given not nearly enough attention in Buddhist thought. It's underappreciated or underrepresented. I think those who have heard of it appreciate it, but I don't hear about it that often. No, and maybe on reading it, if you're not clear about the importance of it, you might miss it. Papancha means making more out of something than it already is. So Bhikkhu Bodhi, I think, translates as diversification, which is fine. It's just a little bit of an awkward word. Oh no, he uses proliferate, which is actually not my favorite translation. Because to proliferate something is to just make copies of it, right? You proliferate. Prolif, I don't even know where it comes from, but it makes it means make more of it. But the point here is not to make it again and again. Papancha means to extrapolate. It's probably the closest I could come to a good definition of papancha, in my understanding. Papancha is used in we're talking about paticca samuppada. There's a point where the Buddha just explains it that way. He explains paticca samuppada that way. He says, the problem comes, it's like avijja paccaya sankhara, and I think sankhara paccaya papancha, or something like that. There's a point where papancha comes into paticca samuppada, and basically what he's saying is that it's the extrapolation. Making more of something than it already is. Making it going beyond the actual fact or the actual phenomenon. So here he says apapanchang, something that is not diverse or not extrapolated, something that is unabstracted. Abstracted is maybe a good way of describing this. Something that is what it is. So we often refer to these as sabhava dhamma. Sabhava means something that is real, has its own existence just for a moment. Every experience is just momentary, but that moment is real. It's this claim of an actual truth. We're studying religion now in university, and when we first start off, we have to talk about what is religion, and there's a lot of talk about postmodernism, which I can actually appreciate to an extent, but if taken to its ultimate, if taken too seriously, it becomes ridiculous. The idea that there is no absolute truth is a very dangerous view. Now, it's all right to challenge truths that are held to be universal, because by and far, most of them are not universal truths. Most of them are just concepts, maybe even practical ones that work, but they're only true in a certain context. So I can appreciate that. But to say that there is no ultimate truth is very dangerous. Now, Buddhism claims that there is ultimate truth, but it's a very simple set of ultimate truths. It's not very complicated or numerous or diverse. And so one of the truths is that experience exists. This idea that these things are true and real. Seeing is seeing, and that happens. Right? So but it's undiversified. Seeing is just seeing. That's how it starts. And you see how this relates to our practice. So all the time I'm talking about, don't react, don't judge, don't make more of something than it is. Papancha, apapanchang, something that is not that yet. Seeing is just seeing. Papancheti. Eti means the A sound is a causative verb, so it means you cause something to be papancha, to be extrapolated or diverse, or more than it actually is. So that's an easy concept to understand. Well, not easy, but for us it should be easy to understand from the point of view of meditation, how seeing should just be seeing, and the problems come when seeing becomes more than that. When seeing becomes I'm seeing, and what I'm seeing is good, what I'm seeing is bad. Once we extrapolate upon the experience, we run into problems. That's where all of our likes and dislikes and ego and conceit and arrogance and jealousy and all sorts of bad stuff comes from. But if we could start by seeing things just as they are, then we could interact with them appropriately. We wouldn't be caught up in the abstractions. We might understand what it means to abstract, but we wouldn't be caught up in it, because we wouldn't forget. This is what sati means. We wouldn't forget about what was real. The papancha, the thing that is not yet diverse, that is simple. But here we have in regards to what's interesting about this is not that. This is a different usage of the idea of proliferation. Related but specific. And there's different interpretations of what he's saying here, and some people look at this and say, well, they don't. It's odd that he's saying that, because it's clear that when the senses cease, there is no more sensing. So why wouldn't you just say there's nothing? It's curious that he doesn't, and that throughout the Buddha's teaching, there is no saying there is nothing. With the cessation of the six senses, there is nothing. You don't see that. There's a sense of avoiding saying that. And it's not just to avoid scaring people. Nothingness doesn't sound appealing. It's that, and I've said this before, that, and this is my understanding of it, which seems quite clear as day from my point of view, so, but everyone has their own point of view, is that the whole concept of self, the whole concept of any entity, quote unquote, existing or not existing, the whole concept of it, the whole framework, that whole plane of thought is papancha. It goes beyond what actually is. What actually is seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, and thinking. And maybe that's even going too far, because that sounds like I'm saying that that's all there is, and then that of course sounds very close to the truth, but it starts to sound like you're talking on the plane of something that exists. So maybe we should even avoid saying that these things exist, and just talk about them as in terms of describing them, right? So we can avoid, because what we want to do is avoid cultivating a conception in our mind of a static reality, something that exists with a big E, I suppose, in terms of being permanent, stable, that kind of thing. That's what we want to get away from, because we have these conceptions in our mind, but they are papancha, they are abstractions, they are extrapolations of reality. Reality is somewhat pragmatic, and if you look up pragmatism, it's not even sure I quite understand where they were going with pragmatism, but it's kind of what I'm talking about, what we're talking about in Buddhism. The idea that we're not so concerned about describing a static reality. We're concerned about describing experiences, which are so much more useful and so much more real and so much more pertinent and so much more crucial in terms of avoiding the problems involved with deluding ourselves, forgetting that what we're experiencing is just quite simple experience. When you see a spider, it's not really a spider. When you see a person, it's not really a person. someone's yelling at you and calling you nasty names, it's actually just sound. And all that anger and frustration and fear and worry that you're cultivating, it's all on you, because they can't hurt you. If they beat you and break your bones, all of this is just experience too. Having your bones broken is probably a really interesting experience. I've never had a bone broken before. It strikes me as being uniquely interesting, but it horrifies us because we make more of it than it actually is. It sounds like a fairly trite thing to say. I mean, it's how can you, it's easy to say, but it is a horrific experience. Well, it's not actually, but we're so caught up in making more out of things than they actually are, that actually all of this suffering is on us. You don't have to suffer no matter what happens to your body. It's very much about the mind. And so what this leading to, this is to point out the problem with talking about atta, self. It's just a conversation that doesn't deserve to be had. Is there a self? Isn't there a self? It's like this question one Buddhist author brings up. He says, if you ask an innocent man, have you stopped beating your wife? How do you even approach that question? I mean, I never started beating my wife, so how could I stop? Right? It's just a question that doesn't even apply. So the question of, is there a self, isn't there a self? Just by asking these, you're in the wrong framework. You're going beyond what is pertinent, useful, understandable, knowable. And so Buddhism really doesn't, in my mind, go there. And it doesn't do it, it's not that it doesn't, the Buddha didn't go there simply because he wasn't capable of giving an adequate explanation. It's that when you go there, you leave behind reality. Papanchang papancheti. You diversify what is undiversified, or you extrapolate upon the unextrapolated. You make more of something that is quite simple. And so what he does say, which is, it's interesting that he does actually say something. He says, as far as the range of the 6 bases for contact extends, just so far extends the range of proliferation. This is Bhikkhu-Bodhi's translation. Again, I'm not liking the word proliferation, but basically that's what that's saying, is he's trying to give him some answer. So he says, proliferation only extends, or let's say diversification only extends to the 6 senses. So what you make more of, what you extrapolate upon, is the 6 senses. And the range of extrapolation is also the range of the 6 senses. So it goes both ways. They don't outstrip each other. The 6 sense bases are the realm of extrapolation. So with the remainless fading away and cessation of the 6 spheres of contact, there is the cessation of proliferation, of extrapolation. That's what he does say. There's no more. There can therefore be no more extrapolating. No more making more of things. No more conceiving of things. And I think to some extent this answer is inadequate. It's still because it doesn't answer these questions. And if you feel that it's inadequate, then from our point of view, from my point of view anyway, it's a sign that you're still in the realm of proliferation, of extrapolation, of abstraction. And you've got to get yourself to the point where you're able to see things just as they are. I mean, that's what we're trying for. You've got to make that paradigm shift. If you want to be a Buddhist, you want to be in the Buddhist club, it's a part of your initiation to make the paradigm shift and look at the world from a point of view of reality. I mean, accept and realize that seeing is just seeing. That's the basis, the basic building block of reality. Now you can extrapolate and live your life as normal, but start from the point of view that experience is the building blocks. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, thinking. Get out of this idea of four-dimensional space-time, of a past, of a future, of a here and a there, of a this and a that, of a static universe that we're taught to believe in. It's not even that those things don't, to some extent, exist. It's that the concept or the conceiving of their existence is a abstraction. I've said this before, and I think this sutta is a good one to back it up. If all of what I said is incomprehensible, well, it's okay, just keep meditating. This is all theory. But hopefully this has gone some way for some of you. Probably the ones of you, I dare say the ones who are actually meditating in this tradition. Some way to help clarify this dilemma of not dealing with the idea, is there a self, for example. So, there you go. There's the Dhamma for this evening. I assume since I wasn't here last night, we got lots of deep and profound and wonderful questions. Or maybe we got lots of questions that I'm going to trash. You still there, Robin?
I am. How important is the use of mantras? I have been practicing a form of vipassana with direct observation without mantra. I find it difficult to do the meditation with the mantra.
It's important. And the fact that it's difficult to do meditation with the mantra is also important. This meditation is designed to be difficult. It's designed to challenge you. Now, there are ways by which it can be difficult that are problematic, I would agree. There are ways for something to be difficult that are not good. Just because something's difficult, forcing food down your throat when you're already full is probably not beneficial, and yet it's quite difficult. But meditation using the mantra is it's not actually the mantra that's difficult, you see. It's the fact that the mantra really forces you into objectivity. It forces you into a state that is normally reserved for something that's easy, right? Because what the mantra does is it fixes you on an object. It brings you very, very close to that object. It may not seem like that, but the reason it doesn't seem like that is because that's jarring. That's not how we normally approach experience. You'll have an experience, and immediately there's papancha, there's extrapolation. You judge it, you react to it. You're only momentarily with the object, and then you're gone. The mind is normally floating from object to it, one object to another. And if that sounds comfortable, it certainly should. I mean, that's quite comfortable. That's how we live, flitting from one object to the next on whim, until we get crushed by disappointment or by getting what we don't want, not getting what we want, that kind of thing. But that's how we normally live our lives. Now, when your mind is forced to stay with the object, well, then there's often a jarring sense, a discomfort involved with that. And often it actually increases your reaction, because you get close to the object, and so you might actually, it's in the beginning, there's certainly, because you're closer to the object, and because because you're not behaving in a way that is comfortable, that is familiar, there's going to be a strong reaction. It's like a sense of withdrawal, really. And so as a result, you become all flustered and upset and find it unpleasant. And then when you do that, of course, because your meditation is something you're not very familiar with, then there arises all sorts of doubts. And with those doubts, well, it gets more difficult, and then you're no longer mindful at all. And so it causes, and then you've heard there are other meditations where you don't practice in this way, and you start to think of what you thought meditation was supposed to be, where you just sit and watch without any kind of work on your part, and it puts you in a right tizzle, to use a technical term. So it's sometimes difficult to convince such a person of the benefit of the practice, because there are lots of other traditions out there that say, hey, don't use a mantra, that's just getting in your way, which is patently absurd considering how tried, tested, and true mantra meditation is. But then we set up a double standard and we say, oh, well, that's only true for samatha, which is another patently absurd statement. Why it should be that way, there's no reason, there's no logical argument. Either it brings you closer to the object or it doesn't. It's not that it brings you closer to one kind of object and brings you farther away from another kind of object. The problem is the object in this case is something that is unsatisfying, unstable, uncontrollable, unpleasant. It's suffering. Remember, the Buddha said the first noble truth is that we should understand suffering fully. That's our practice. Our practice isn't to run away from suffering. It isn't to do it as easy. Whenever anyone brings up this concept of difficulty, I say, well, okay, if you want an easy practice, go home or just lie down, watch television. If easy is what you're looking for, that's not a problem. I can help you find easy. But there's no sense that difficulty makes something wrong. And in this case, I can affirm that the difficulty is a good thing. It's challenging you. And part of the difficulty is probably, in most cases, that you have doubt. Does this guy really know what he's talking about? Is this technique really the right technique? Really a good technique? In which case, I tell you to say to yourself, doubting, doubting, and you'll find, wow, the doubt just goes away. It might come back, but if you say to yourself, doubting, doubting, like everything else, it will go away. So I'm not sure how well I can answer that question. In the end, you have to find your way yourself. But, my simple answer is absolutely, it's very important. It's essential. Well, it's not essential. As I've said, yes, you can become enlightened in many different ways, and it's theoretically possible for someone to become enlightened watching a leaf fall from a tree. That sort of thing happens. But it's not practically useful. I wouldn't just go and sit under a tree and watch leaves fall to become enlightened. So here we have I guess what I would say is it's better to use the mantra. It's more powerful. If you're not using the mantra, it's sketchy at best as to whether you're actually meditating. I would say in most cases you're meditating to some extent, but it's very hard to tell whether you're actually meditating or not, because how do you define what is meditation and what is not then, right? How do you define what is mindful and what is not? If you're just sitting and watching, because we are always watching, how do you keep yourself from conceiving, from extrapolating? That's what the mantra is for. That's exactly what it's for, to keep you from extrapolating. This should all be clear. If you think about it and you think about all these concepts, it should be quite clear. That's why we use the mantra. That's all what I was just talking about. We extrapolate things. So in order to avoid that, we remind ourselves of what it actually is. seeing, and then the extrapolation doesn't occur, or it's lessened. Poor thing. Got a big bug.
Could we continue doing Dhammapada Day? Maybe switch it to another day since you'll be busy on Mondays?
Maybe.
Sometimes I feel bad that I exist because I inevitably kill things in my wake. Is this a strange view?
It's not strange. I mean, it's not proper view. So you're not actually killing. If you kill on purpose, that's killing. If things die because you walk around, well, things die all the time. You'll die eventually. So don't feel bad.
It's kind of the giantist view, right? You have to sweep the path in front of you so you didn't step on any insects.
Well, and eventually starve yourself to death. That's what they're really into.
I have a few questions about meditation techniques. 1. In walking meditation, I seem to be guiding my feet consciously. So isn't that not observance? I mean, it's like I'm observing after the action was controlled, which is probably the wrong way.
Yeah, I mean, what you're seeing is your tendency to try and control things, which is good to see. You'll see how much suffering is involved there, and that'll eventually change. Next.
In relation to overcoming that, I had an idea to pace my walks really slow so I can observe them instead of guiding them. Also, is it somewhat much harder? Is that a correct form?
No. I've talked about this before, that's cheating. And it's forcing yourself to not force. If you think about it, you'll see how wrong it is, how impossible it is. Because what you're saying is, here I'm trying to control things, and that's happening naturally, so instead, I'll control myself not to control. You see? No, that's the point, is there's no way out of it. We don't want to face up to the fact that we are messed up. And that's what you're facing up to. Yeah, you're trying to control it. It's not like you're intending to try and control it, it's just your habit. But that's what you're seeing. You're seeing that as it's a habit, you're seeing how stressful that is. And that's gonna lead you to letting it go.
About the mantra you mentioned, you always note, but a day ago, answering someone's question, you concurred that noting could be without saying.
No, I didn't.
That was my first experience in meditation. It had much more resolution and discovery to each moment than the mantra. So is that also a proper technique, or are there limitations and things to be careful there also?
I don't know that I ever said noting could be done without saying. I mean, you don't ever say it out loud, right? But it's a mantra, it's a word that you use. This is a technique. If you don't like it, well, fine, there's lots of other techniques out there. My claim is that this technique is stronger than most others, and clearer, better. But absolutely, if you want to go back to the other meditation and believe that it had much more resolution and discovery to each moment, power to you. I don't believe that to be the truth. I mean, or I don't believe that to be the essential and proper understanding of reality, but I'm just putting it out there that that's my view. Is that all of that resolution and discovery is not. I mean, it's not where we're going. It's not what we're looking at. So, one thing you might want to think about this meditation is it's somewhat brutalist. don't know if that's the right word. And it's parsimonious. We're cutting off all the excess fluff. So there's no investigation, there's no discovery, there's no resolution. I mean, well, there are many things that are cut through, as far as discovery and resolution. They're cut through to things that are more important, like the fact that you're trying to control everything. That's what you should be seeing. And that's why it should be difficult for most people, because we have all sorts of messed up stuff inside. If your meditation's not showing you that, and it's just kind of comfortable, and you have these epiphanies once in a while, but you don't actually challenge yourself. I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to argue this too much. I think we're beating a dead horse. If you like what I teach, come for it. I'm not going to try and convince you. If you don't like it, go elsewhere. I'm not looking for students.
To rephrase a previous inquiry, I had a question regarding how momentary experiences should be noted. For instance, when my mind recalls a disturbing event, do I just say upset, upset, and or thinking, thinking until it goes away? Or just when it arises and then immediately return to my base object, the rising and fall of my abdomen? When upset, does one just say upset, upset twice to acknowledge the momentary experience and then immediately return to the abdomen? Or does one keep noting the momentary experience for however long it lasts and only return to the abdomen after it's gone?
Try and stay with it until it goes away. If after a long time it doesn't go away, then you can ignore it and come back to the main meditation. But do acknowledge it for quite some time.
And I've tried to ask you what a long time is, and you won't answer that.
Yeah, well, it shouldn't be. It's not like 13.5 times. It's not what it means.
For those of us with well-managed chronic illnesses of the body, is ordination possible? I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I don't know if monkhood is compatible with my body's management. Health insurance, refrigerated insulin, low-carb diet, frequent medical exams. Thank you for this opportunity to ask.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem. There are monks who have diabetes, but they tend to be somewhat burdensome. It's not ideal. Certainly not technically against the rules, but it might fall into something that is in line with what is against the rules. Certain types of illnesses are not allowed. If you have those illnesses, you can't become a monk, and one might argue that diabetes should fall into the same category, because it is a disease that requires, a sickness that requires constant medication. Even though, in a modern setting, it's quite easy. Like if I got diabetes, well, I could, certainly I have enough support to help me get my medication, but that's not really an excuse. And I mean, that's another thing, is if a monk gets sick, well, then he's to be taken care of. He or she is to be taken care of, whether they're a burden or not. But you see, accepting people who are already sick, it becomes problematic. One of the reasons is because, well, then sick people will often ordain, because they can't, because it makes life easier to be supported by the Sangha. And then we end up with a bunch of sick people, which, it's not anything against sick people, but, if everyone's sick, well, it kind of causes problems. I mean, it's just, practically speaking, problematic to accept sick people. And I think you could argue that diabetes is there, which may sound cruel and harsh, but, as along with many other things, you have to understand that monkhood isn't the be-all, end-all of Buddhism. And there are people who will not ordain and become enlightened without ordaining. There's many people who will become sotapanna, even become arahant without ordaining. But you may have to accept the fact that a person like this may not be appropriate to ordain. I'd certainly want to think long and hard about whether to accept such a person based on my understanding of the principles of ordination.
The word delusion sounds a bit broad. Maybe that's the case because I don't speak English as a native language. Can you please give an example in daily life in which someone experiences something and notes delusion? Thank
Yeah,
you.
I don't know that you'd know delusion. Like if you're deluded, you're probably not very mindful. But delusion is purposefully general. It means it's a umbrella term. So confused. If you're confused, that's a kind of delusion in our use of the word. If you have doubt, that's a kind of moha. Moha is the word, and it doesn't actually mean delusion. Moha comes from muh, which means muddled. I've talked about this before. Muh is kind of like the English word muddled, confused, distorted, unclear. It's all that stuff. But pride and conceit are all in there. So you might say confused, I think, is a clear one. Conceited might be another one. Arrogant, if you feel you're feeling arrogant or conceited or self-righteous. That's a good question.
I believe you said there are 9 forms of conceit based upon the combinations of the 3 potential perspectives and the 3 potential realities. Thus, if I believe someone is above me, can I note that as conceit? Likewise, if I believe I am below someone, would it still be sensible from that end to denote it as conceit? Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in English it might not work so well, but you can also just note knowing or feeling. You don't have to find a technical word for it. In some cases it's more trouble than it's worth trying to find the right word. So just feeling or knowing is sometimes best.
Isn't meditating, directing the mind to do certain things, controlling the mind? When I'm directing it to a touch point and can feel the touching, have I not just made it do what I want it to do?
To some extent, yeah. I mean, there's absolutely a theoretical way of believing, understanding it in the way you just described it, but it's. I mean, imagine we didn't do what we do, right? We didn't have this technique, and you were to just walk down the street, and as you're walking, you'd say walking, walking, and you'd say, well, how can I call this meditation because I'm controlling it? But you see, you were already walking anyway, is the point. So the only reason you mention this is because it's not what you would normally do. So the idea is we're just making this what we normally do. Or a counter-argument might be just, well, it becomes an ordinary practice. So what we're trying to do is observe the mind when it undertakes certain simple exercises. So the only reason for giving you these seemingly mindless tasks is to simplify reality, because reality is far too complex and difficult for a beginner anyway and well, most meditators to cultivate mindfulness with it as a base. So we're just simplifying the ordinary. And the only time that forcing comes into play is when you're accustomed to doing things differently. Like when you're accustomed to walking quickly and having to walk one step at a time. Well, in the beginning that's kind of, as you say, forced, but it's, in a sense, that's just a part of our learning experience. We're not so much concerned with the fact that this is controlling or that is controlling. We're trying to learn about how the mind works in ordinary experience, including, controlling things to that extent, like in terms of intending to do something. When you intend to do meditation, or you intend to walk, or you intend to sit, we're trying to learn what that's like, because it happens anyway. When you walk down the street, there's an intention, so that's interesting for us to learn about.
The live stream link says live stream currently offline. Next broadcast is at 1 UTC, a day from now, even though the stream is active. Please fix the live stream notifications page.
Yeah, I'm no longer the IT guy here, but I don't know. I mean, I'm doing everything. Maybe I'm not. Let me see. Nope. Live stream currently offline. Something's wrong. That's a bug. Please submit an issue to our GitHub project. Yeah, so if you want resolution to such issues, you have to submit an issue. I think it talks about it in the help page. Robin? Uh-oh, did I lose Robin? Oh, I don't hear you at all now.
Apologies, I was muted. It seems that the volume of today's broadcast is rather low. Do you have an objective way of seeing how loudly you are broadcasting?
Yes. Yeah, for some reason the volume was down. So I think now I'm much louder. And it's my feeling that now I will be louder. I've got Robin a little lower, because apparently she's much louder than I am.
Yeah, that was submitted just 40 minutes ago, so I don't know, maybe it's not quite as loud as we think it is.
Well, I just upped it.
Okay.
But I don't, for some reason it was turned down again. I don't know what's going on there.
Okay. How do I get the meditation booklet?
Well, it's on the internet. I gave you the link. I think you got the link. If you want a hard copy, you got to come see me.
Yeah, if you don't have the link in front of you, if you click on the top of the meditation site, click on the menu, it's under guide as well. How long did it take you to learn Pali? How long did it take you to learn Thai? Which has been more useful? Is there a significant difference in reading the Tipitaka in Pali than in English?
I'm not really tempted to answer these questions. I know, I mean, they're useful questions, but if we get too far afield, you can see I've got like 10 questions left to answer. And it's already almost 10. And it's been a long day. So I think I'm going to have to pass on such questions. Apologies, because it's a good question. It's just outside of the realm of this forum.
Why are we able to conceive these papancha thoughts if they are beyond reality and more than what's there? Aren't these abstractions just as much a part of reality as seeing, hearing, smelling, etc.?
Well, the thought is a part of reality, but the object of the thought may very well just be a concept. Like if you think of a rabbit with horns, does that mean the rabbit with horns is real? Is it as real as a real rabbit? Right? So even thinking in terms of ordinary reality, we know that a rabbit is more real than a rabbit with horns. But the same sort of logical process goes with thinking of the difference between seeing and the rabbit that you see. The seeing is real, but the rabbit is just something that arises in the mind. I mean, it's not that hard for me to understand the difference. And so no, the abstractions themselves are not in any way as real as the reality, the experiences. Yeah, Chad's got some questions and I'm just going to delete, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, they're getting better, but I apologize for deleting these, but I've got to stick to I'm not going to entertain what actually is nirvana. I mean, that's a good question, but it's much more theoretical, and I'm not here to talk about Buddhist theory exactly. One still suffers even if the ego is dropped. That's not true. It's cause suffering. How is this happiness? Well, that's actually a fairly good one. I shouldn't have deleted that one. But I did. So.
Bhante, is it okay to use the word verbs or actions instead of experiences, as in reality is made up of verbs? Because when we say experiencing, it could give the notion that there is an experience.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe you're overthinking it. No, it's a good, but it's just semantics. It's not that important. When you say experience, it takes people away from the abstract and to, oh yeah, seeing, because seeing is what we understand as an experience.
I've been meditating for a while, and sometimes I notice that this rising feeling during meditation is if I can lift out of my body when this happens, I become really terrified and stop. What should I do? Go with the experience? Is this normal?
Again, it sounds like you're not practicing in our tradition, so I can't give advice on meditation unless you practice according to our tradition. Now, if you are, apologies, you would just say afraid, and let it go. Come back to the rising, falling. There. Got rid of all the questions before 10 o'clock.
Yes.
Thank you, Robin, for your help. Thank you, everyone, for your continued interest. Please don't be discouraged by my vicious slashing of inquiry. Wish you all the best and hope that you're able to practice in whatever way to find peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering. Good night.
Thank you, Bhante. Good night.